Hey guys, I'm the 50s kid. This is my E46 BMW, and E46s have kind of a notorious problem. They have plastic valve covers. With age, those valve covers like to crack, they will leak, particularly between cylinders 5 and 6. They'll leak oil right onto the exhaust manifold, it'll burn, you'll have an oil smell, it'll come into the car. It really sucks. One thing you can do to fix this is you can upgrade to an M56 valve cover because those were solid aluminum and those will never crack, never warp. Those will be all good. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that conversion. So let's get started. So this is what the M56 valve cover looks like. You can buy one of these on eBay. I actually sell these now. I sell a whole nice little kit, and the kit includes a nice cleaned M56 valve cover, because when you pull these things off in the junkyard, they're full of gunk, everything's caked on. I get them cleaned up. And I take the gaskets because the gaskets are totally reusable, and that saves you money. You know, the gaskets are like 80 bucks, but BMW actually chose to use good rubber in these gaskets. These are Viton, you can see from the brown color. These ones are good. They're always nice and pliable, never hard and cracked. They are totally reusable, and this one is metal impregnated, so it's all good. You can reuse this gasket. I also include the wiring harness because this particular wiring harness happens to bolt to this cover right here. You can see these little bolts. You can see these little bosses right here that bolt on like that. On the plastic covers, the wiring harness actually snaps down into sort of little channels that are molded into the plastic cover. So you know, that wiring harness is not going to snap into this one because there are no little channels. So you kind of want to have this wiring harness because this one happens to bolt into the cover. Now, if you have, one thing you want to notice is that this actually uses the push-on style coils. Older E46s that had the M52TU or the M54, earlier model of the M54 engine, they actually had coils that bolted to the valve cover. Those style coils will not work on this because they won't actually go down far enough and there's nowhere to bolt them on. These are the upgraded push-on style coils that the later model BMWs used, the E90s, all those kinds of engines used. But the later model M54s also used these style coils. So some of you might actually have a plastic valve cover where you have the push-on coils. If you have that, that's great. You can straight upgrade to one of these covers. It's just a totally plug-and-play type of installation. The connector on the end of this wiring harness is the same. This connector is the same. You don't have to do anything. However, if you have the older style bolt-in coils, you're going to have harnesses that are just a little different. First of all, the pinouts on this connector is going to be a little different, and then this connector is going to be different. The wires are the same. You can see it's the same red with white stripe and brown wire. The red with white stripe is the power, the brown is the ground. But this is for the M52TU, the really old one. This style connector is different. You know, it just fits a little differently. And then for the M54 engines, it had a different connector yet still. This one has round pins, whereas these ones have blade style pins. Now, on the M52 or the M54, the wiring pinouts are going to be the same. These are different from this one right here. So in order to adapt this to the old style engine, what we're going to have to do is repin this connector, and then we're going to have to actually modify this one. We're going to cut it, and we're going to transplant the old connector from our wiring harness, from the engine that we have. In my particular case, I've got an M54, so this is the harness that I have. So I'm going to cut this one right here. I'm going to cut this one right here. I'm just going to crimp those on and using heat shrink butt connectors. Real simple, real easy, not a big deal. And I'm going to show you how to repin this connector right now. And real quick, this is the difference between the two styles of coil. This is the bolt-on coil. You can see it's much bigger. It's got a square shape. It's got a rectangular connector. This is the push-on coil. It does not bolt in. It's got a triangular connector. and it's got this little flip up thing. That's the difference. So it's actually real easy to repin one of these connectors. All you need is a little flathead screwdriver, and you need a set of these depinning tools, which you can get for $3 on eBay. These are the ones. You're also going to need some pinout information. Here you go. This is it. You can hit pause. And I'm just going to be following this. So what we need to do is we need to take off this black connector, this little black outside sheath. There's a little pin right there. Okay, so we're just going to need to sort of get it up over that pin so that it's up like that. And then there's a little snap right there. We just have to bend that down and push. I can probably do that with my fingernail. Push and slide the thing out. Now, to depin these, we just have to select the right tool, which I think this is it. I just happen to select the right one. All you got to do is you can see how the little connectors are in there. So the pins would normally want to slide in horizontally like that. We want to slide the connector in like this. Okay? You want to push it all the way back, and then you can get the little pin out. Now, go ahead and take a look at your wire colors and make sure, just verify that my pinouts are correct. I've verified them, but you need to double check, okay? So I know they're correct. I'm just depinning this whole connector. We don't need to take out the middle one, the brown cable, because that is always the same. It's always going to be the ground. We're just removing the 6 coil wires. These actually trigger the coils. The wire colors are the same. They stay the same between all years. So there's no confusion there. Now, if you want to know which pins are which, you slide your little black connector on. You can see that the pins are numbered on the black connector there. So you just got to work off of that thing. It basically goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So for pin 1, we want the black and yellow, which is this guy. We just need to slide it in correctly. Okay, and then for pin 2, we want black and red. Then we want black and white for pin 3. So which way does that go? It goes sideways, doesn't it? So for pin 7, we want black and purple, which is going to be this one. For pin 8, we want black and green. And last one, black and blue, which I'm going to move to down here. Now on the MS42, MS43, there's an extra ground wire which is on pin 6, which we're not going to have on the MS45 wiring harness. So you'll just ignore that one. So now all we need to do is change this connector over to the proper one for our car. So at this point you would need your old wiring harness. Let me quickly show you how to get it out of the car. You need to remove the cover to your electronics box. Depending on which model you have, you either have 5mm Allens. Ooh, that broke off there. Or you have T25 Torx bolts. My plastic's getting real brittle. And this is the wiring harness that we need to actually remove. So you just lift it out and you come over here, you pull out this connector, which my box is a little bit broken, so I don't know if I can do it one-handed. It's all brittle. Okay, we got that. And then you just have to remove this connector, and there's just a little push-in tab right here. So if we push in and pull out, that's it. And you just sort of pull your harness out, kind of like that. And then all you do is unsnap this cover with your fingernails. Get that off of there, and your harness will come out. So you saw which wiring harness mine was. The only difference between them is the shape of the connector and the actual connectors themselves. You can see round versus flat. So we're not going to de-pin these because it's actually going to be a little different, at least for me anyway. It's not going to work. If you had this one, you could possibly de-pin that and de-pin these two and swap them over. But these particular set of tools doesn't have a de-pinner for that. So I think just the easiest way is we're just going to cut this and crimp the new ones on. So I'm not going to do my actual one because I pulled this from the junkyard for this particular purpose. So we're just going to switch these over. So first of all, I'm going to remove the little Tessa tape here. And I want to cut this wire probably about there, okay? So on the old one, I want to leave about equal length room on either side, just in case you need to reconnect the old one for any reason, something happens, particularly on your old wiring harness. You know, if you decide to go back someday, you want to just sort of cut this right in the middle. That way you have ample room to reconnect these with some other butt connectors at some later date if you want to do that. So here's the old one, not going to use that. Here's the new one that we are going to use. All we're going to do is crimp them together. So we need a crimping tool. These are 14 gauge wire. So just going to strip off the ends here. You want to get some heat shrink butt connectors. I got this from Harbor Freight. They're real cheap. We're going to use the blue ones. So they will basically just fit, just like that. And we're going to crimp those in. Like that. Give it a little tug, make sure it doesn't come off. You might get a stray wire sticking out. You got to make sure that these are really straight. You might need to twist it around a little. Make it smaller. Tug test. It's all good. Here. Let's do the crimps on both sides, on the same side. Just for my OCD-ness. Just kidding, I don't really have OCD. Okay, there we are. Tug test, we're all good. Now we just need to activate the heat shrink. You could do this with a Bic lighter too, by the way. I think this particular heat gun takes a long time. So these particular heat shrink butt connectors, they have a little adhesive inside of them. I was hoping to get some of it oozing out, but I think that this heat gun is just not quite hot enough to make it go oozing out. But basically that adhesive inside seals out water and seals out, make sure that you don't get corrosion. That's why I advocate using these. So these are watertight heat shrink butt connectors. Those are the ones you want to buy. So I'm just going to get this one shrunk on. So there we go. There is our M56 wiring harness converted to work with an M54 engine. I will put links to where you can get all these tools in the description of this video. Now, this is not going to be a video about how to change the valve cover over on one of these engines. I have another video for that. I will link it right up here and in the description. It's really pretty easy, but I'll give you a real basic overview just so you know how to do it. I think it's pretty self-evident on how you get this valve cover off. You can see that they're just 10mm bolts all the way around, okay? You're going to save those bolts. We're going to reuse them. It's the exact same bolts. You're going to reuse your rubber grommets. Hopefully yours are, it helps if you have changed your valve cover gasket once already. If you never have, your grommets are going to be really hard and you want to go ahead and buy new grommets because I don't supply those. Typically the ones that I get are not that great because they didn't use the good rubber on those. Those were just the leftovers from the M54 valve cover. But you should be able to buy those grommets on eBay for relatively inexpensive. So you just want to take them all off. Real easy to get to. There are going to be 4. 1 here, 2, 3, and 4. Some of them are going to have 8mm nuts on the top of them, so you'll need to remove those first because there's a ground wire here, there's a ground wire here, there isn't one right here, but there's another ground wire right here. So you need to remove those 8mm nuts. Again, you'll save them. You're going to need 2 of them because you're going to have 2 ground wires with the new wiring harness. And you just use a normal ratchet. You'll need a 10mm socket with an extension. You'll just get all these bolts. You'll take the extension off when it comes to the back one right here because you don't have room. You got to get under this right here. So that's just a normal 10mm socket right there. And in the back, there's this one, which is sort of hiding right in the back. You should be able to get on that one with just a regular socket, regular ratchet, get on that one and bust it free. Just like that, okay? Those are the 2 hard ones, and that's it. Take all those bolts out, pop the valve cover off. You're gonna need to get this off. Normally there's gonna be a squeeze connection. Mine's actually broken off right here. So you'll need to pop that off, and then you can get your valve cover off. If you're having trouble, if it's kind of stuck, just get a pry bar underneath here and just kind of pry against the metal right here, and you'll get it off. Not a big deal. The last thing we need to talk about is the CCV system, which is what this tube leads down to. Now, you can, if you want to, you can leave your old system in place and you can just connect this right to the new valve cover. The connection is exactly the same. You could do that if you want to. In that case, you would have 2 CCV systems operating on your car, and I believe the one in the new valve cover won't actually work. Let me show you. I really shouldn't say that it won't work because it sort of will and it won't work. It just won't work exactly properly, but let me explain. So you have this oil separator underneath your intake manifold right now. It's got the diaphragm inside here. When the engine's on, it's placing full vacuum on this port right here, and it sort of sucks that diaphragm closed, and there's a spring in there which pushes it open just a little bit. And when you rev your engine and the vacuum dies, the spring pushes the diaphragm out, more blow-by goes into the intake to get recycled. That's how that system works. Well, they moved that into this valve cover right here. So imagine that this is right there, okay? And this is where you're actually applying full vacuum to this port directly from the intake manifold. So this thing will actually do all of the oil separation in here. You can see the oil enters here, or the vapors, I should say, enter here. And there are just a couple of passages for them to pass through, and the oil just kind of splatters and condenses up on here. And then it just gets sucked past the diaphragm into this chamber right here, and then it just exits out the tube right here and goes straight into the intake. So as a final word, guys, let's talk about the diaphragm cover. You might be tempted to try to take it off and clean out the diaphragm that's inside, check on the condition of it. I caution you, do not do that. These are brittle with age, and these little ears will snap off, every single one of them, and you'll never be able to get this thing snapped back on, and you cannot buy these separately. You have to buy a whole new cover. So don't even try to do it. So here's the thing. These don't last all that long. They last maybe 75,000 miles, and the whole system was poorly designed because it was located away from the engine. The tubes would often clog up with, like, you know, a yellow mayo type of substance, which is just moisture mixed with oil. So you had to replace these systems quite often. And in some cases, because the yellow mayo oil would develop inside of here, it would kind of, the water inside there would freeze, and, you know, ice crystals would form, and that would kind of puncture the diaphragm and wear it out, and then, you know, this thing would be toast. But I've taken a lot of these off in the junkyard, and, you know, sometimes I come across ones where somebody's already tried to pop the cover off, so I use that opportunity to examine the diaphragm. I've never found a torn diaphragm. They've always been fine. And, you know, these covers are on average probably 150,000 miles old, and I've never pulled one off. I've never seen the yellow mayo. I've never seen one that was clogged up with anything. And I think the reason for that is because it's located in the valve cover, and this valve cover comes up to engine temperature every time you drive the car. So I think that prevents all that yellow mayo problem from happening, and prevents the whole system from getting clogged up. Plus, there are no small tubes on this thing. It's a big passage all the way through here. So, you know, they don't really get clogged, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm not too worried about it. You know, I take the opportunity when I get these, I take this panel off and I clean it out, and I take a look in there, I take a look at the diaphragm. I've never, I make sure that I don't see any obvious damage, and I won't sell one if I see obvious damage, but I think they're fine. As long as you leave them alone, I think they're probably going to be good for another 150,000 miles. I can't guarantee that, obviously, but I think it'll be fine if you just leave it alone. So you have two choices. You could leave the old system intact because it still leads to the intake manifold at the end of the day. So you're still sucking blow-by gases out of your new valve cover. Imagine the new valve cover was installed. This would still be sucking blow-by gases out of it. It would just be going through a second oil separator and a second diaphragm, and then eventually get recycled into the intake manifold. But I understand a lot of you don't like that system. You don't like the idea of even having that system. Maybe that's the reason for you to switch to the M56 valve cover. I totally get it. I understand. Here's what you do if you want to pull out your old CCV system. So what I'm going to recommend you do is sort of use a hybrid of your old CCV system. You might want to purchase a replacement old CCV system for this purpose, just so that you can actually get the hoses out easier. It's easier, if you've never had your hoses out, it's easier to just kind of cut them off and break them off and just kind of get them out that way. But what you want to do is you want to use your old upper hose right here. This upper hose goes to right here, because the thing is, this upper hose leads still to the intake manifold. And if you just removed it and left that port open, then that's going to be a massive vacuum leak. You can pinch that off if you want to. That's totally fine. That's up to you. If you want to figure out a way to close that port off back there, then you don't need this tube. But I think it's easier to use this tube, and then we're going to take the connector, the other connector that connects to the intake manifold. This is the main one right here. This is what it looks like, okay? What I do is I cut the plastic tube off of it, and I've actually just connected some 5/8 hose to this right here, okay? And so this would connect like this, and these are the connections right here. That's where they go in. This one goes in right here. This one goes in right there, okay? And what we would do is we would run this tube right underneath the intake manifold right here, and then it would come up where this one comes up, and this is the fitting for right here. So this one just snaps into the valve cover. So that's what I recommend you do. That's just a real simple, easy way. It looks factory, it would look great. You might need a slightly longer length of hose than this. I'll find out in a little bit here. Actually, honestly, I'm not going to do it because I need to film a different video. I plan to film a video on how to change your M54 CCV system, so I want to leave that in place because I need to leave it in place for the video. But this is what I would do, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it in place. I'm going to connect this in there. It's still going to work exactly the same way, but that's what you would do. But there is one more thing that you do want to do, and I'm going to show you. As you can see, I've removed a couple of things from this side of the engine, all the intake tubes, the DISA valve, just to make it easier for you guys to see down in here, and B, to make it possible to actually remove the dipstick tube. Now, you don't need to remove it all the way, but it is a little easier if you do remove it. And the reason why is because if you look down here, this is a rubber tube that connects down to a little arm that comes off of the dipstick tube. We need to actually disconnect that tube because that actually comes from the oil separator. And what you need to do is you need to cap that off, that little port off, with a vacuum cap. That way you have no vacuum leaks on your engine. So I'm going to remove it and I'll show you it more closely. So to see how to remove all the components on this side of the engine, go ahead and check out my common repair steps video. I typically never cover those things again because it just gets redundant. So check out that video to see how to remove all these things. To remove the dipstick tube, there's a 13mm bolt and it's just right down here. And here, I've gone ahead and pulled out the dipstick tube. It's right here so that you can get a closer look at that little arm that's sticking out from the side of it. This is the tube that you have to pull off. Now, you can just go ahead and cut this with a little X-Acto knife or, a little utility blade. Cut that rubber hose right down like that, and it'll come right off real easily. Me, I gotta be a little more careful getting it off because I plan to reuse it. Let's see if the little hose puller tool will work here. It usually only works on smaller hoses though. Oh, there we go. Worked real nicely, didn't it? So Dorman makes a package of vacuum caps. They come in, you know, a package that looks like this, you know, the Dorman Help brand kind of thing. And it's just a package of a bunch of different sizes of vacuum caps. I lost the package a long time ago. I just saved the vacuum caps in here. I don't know if you can really see them, but the largest one in there looks like this. And you can use this to plug off this tube. And that's all you need to do. Now, when you put this back in, you have no vacuum leaks. Remember, when you're putting this back in, you got to remember to get the O-ring from down off of there. Let's see, my O-ring is actually stuck on here and probably really needs to be changed. So I should look into that. I think I will look into that. Usually the O-ring gets stuck down where you actually stick this thing. So make sure you grab your O-ring out, put it on. So remember, you only need to cap off, you only need to pull out this dipstick tube and cap off this port if you are removing your old CCV system. If you are just leaving it in place and deciding to use like both at the same time, you don't need to do any of this. It just kind of makes the whole installation easier, but the proper way really is to kind of pull it out and use the customized hose like I showed you earlier, and then cap this port off. This is the proper way to do it. This is the way I recommend you do it, but I'm not going to get mad at you if you are too lazy to do all this stuff. Now, ultimately, I really think that you should just leave the old oil separator under there. Like, who cares? It's under there. Why go through all the extra work to pull it out? All you need to do is just get the old hose off, just this part right here, and just kind of, you can just kind of cut the old hoses away, make some room for yourself. You don't need to kind of kill yourself over this whole thing, you know, just make room for yourself, cut all the old stuff out, and just put in the new stuff that you need, only the new stuff you need. Or if you're really meticulous, you can remove all the old stuff. I don't actually have a video on how to remove it with the intake manifold still in place. Like I said, I'm gonna make that video very soon. It's probably gonna be after this, probably a week after this or so. So just, I'll probably throw a link on the screen once I do make that video. So I do have the M56 valve cover installed now, and I just wanted to show you that it is possible to run the beauty cover from the M56. If you want to go ahead and pick one of those up, you know, it makes it look nice, it fits in there, there's a good clearance, so it's all good. I'm going to remove it now because I want to show you a couple of things. So what I want to point out to you is the oxygen sensor connectors. On the old plastic valve cover, there were these little clips that you can snap those into, but of course on the M56 model they moved these connectors to up over in this area. So what I've gone ahead and done is I put some zip ties over these little clips right here. These are just the same clips that are on the plastic valve cover. They hold these lines and the wires. They just kind of hold them back. So I've just, you know, there's a little hole in there. I've just put a zip tie around that and zip tied them there. That way they won't fall down and you know, the wiring harnesses won't melt on the exhaust manifolds. Okay guys, I have a small edit to make. It looks like this hose is not compatible with the port on the side of the valve cover right here. It looks like they just changed the size of it. This is the actual hose that goes for the M56. You can see it's smaller in diameter, so that's the one that would snap on there. So if you want to keep like a stock look, you can go ahead and buy one of these and then just make a slit down the plastic, cut this fitting out, and then just use that instead of this one in the hose that I showed you earlier. Me, in my particular situation, since I'm doing it this way, I'm going to need to use just a real big 1-inch piece of vacuum hose to kind of slip that in here, or heater hose is actually what it is. And since it's just slightly a little too big, I'm going to put some band clamps over those just to kind of hold that, make sure there's no vacuum leak there. Yeah, that's not quite as stock looking as I wanted, but it'll work for the purposes of demonstration. Last thing I want to mention is you don't need an M56 oil cap. You can use the M54. It is totally compatible. So, moment of truth, let's start it up. Works like a charm. And there you have it. So you remember this hose from earlier in the video that I told you you should make? That's going to connect the valve cover to the intake manifold. Well, this is the old fitting that's not going to work. Here is the M56 one. I went ahead and I just made a slit down there just so we can take that off. And that fits perfectly. So that's your setup. Go ahead and make one of those, and that'll connect your valve cover to your intake manifold. So I just got back from an extended test drive. Everything went great, no problems, it's all good. So if you want to pick up one of these valve cover conversion packages, I sell them on eBay. Just search for M56 valve cover and you'll see me. You'll see all my ones on there. I usually have some for sale. Or you can just contact me directly, whatever you want to do. If you want me to repin your connector for you, I'd be happy to do that. I'll cut off the two wires there, and I'll crimp on some of those blue connectors for you, and then you can just kind of heat shrink them yourself with like a Bic lighter or something. So just let me know if you want to do that. Just send me a message or whatever. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. I am the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching.